Imagine being a young princess. The palace walls tower over you, your every step watched by servants, priests, and guards. You've been raised with jewels in your hair and silks against your skin. But tonight is different. Tonight, you are not simply a daughter of kings. You are about to become a wife, and your entire future, your safety, your dignity, even your life, depends on what happens in a single room, the royal bedchamber. This was no ordinary wedding night. Across medieval Europe and beyond, princesses were subjected to humiliating rituals designed to test their chastity. The idea was simple, yet brutal. A royal bride's body was not her own. It was the property of her family, her husband, and the dynasty she married into. And to prove she was untouched, she had to pass the bedchamber test. Failure meant disgrace, exile, or even death. Priests would wait outside the chamber. Servants would lurk by the door. Sometimes sheets were inspected for blood. In some courts, witnesses were even present as the bride lay down for her most intimate act, stripped of privacy and dignity. To be royal was to live under constant scrutiny, even in the most personal corner of life. You can almost feel the weight of those eyes as you imagine yourself in her place. There is no room for fear, no room for mistakes. The reputation of a kingdom hangs on your body, and you are expected to prove yourself in a single night. And so, countless princesses endured these tests in silence. Some survived, others did not. Their stories are hidden in chronicles, whispered in courts, and recorded by horrified scribes who struggled to understand the cruelty of such traditions. Tonight, we step into those chambers and uncover the humiliating reality of these tests. You'll see how they were carried out, why they mattered so much, and what happened to the women who failed. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Leave a comment below. I love seeing how history connects people across the world. And if you find yourself drawn into these forgotten stories, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more secrets of the past waiting for you here. But for now, let's return to the candlelit chamber, where a young princess lies awake, knowing that her worth will soon be measured not by her words or her wisdom, but by the blood on a sheet. The most common form of the bedchamber test was the blood ritual. Across Europe, from France to Spain to the German states, it was believed that a virgin's body would break and bleed on the wedding night. This fragile expectation became law in royal marriages. The sheets were spread wide, inspected by attendants, and sometimes displayed publicly. The fate of a dynasty could rest on a stain of red. But biology is never so simple. Not all women bleed, and those who did not were often accused of impurity. Imagine the terror. A princess raised under strict supervision, forbidden even to speak privately with men, now facing the possibility that her body might betray her innocence through no fault of her own. Chroniclers record such humiliations vividly. In the court of Aragon, one royal bride was nearly sent back to her family when her wedding sheets revealed no proof. Priests debated, courtiers whispered, and her honor trembled in the balance. Only the testimony of her mother and the desperation of her new husband saved her from annulment. Elsewhere, the situation could be even worse. In Poland, one 15th century princess was dragged before clerics after her wedding night produced no blood. Physicians were ordered to examine her body. A shocking intrusion that stripped her of dignity. They declared her pure, but the humiliation never left her. Her story became a cautionary tale for generations of royal daughters. The cruelty of these tests lay in their impossibility. They demanded proof that nature itself could not always provide. A woman could be entirely untouched and yet fail. And failure was not just personal, it was political. A failed test could spark disputes between kingdoms, annul treaties, and end alliances. The body of a princess was a battlefield where nations placed their hopes. To the men in power, the blood was proof of control. To the princess herself, it was a nightmare of exposure. Imagine lying awake the night before, knowing that your future would be decided not by your courage, not by your character, but by whether your body obeyed an ancient myth. And yet, these tests continued for centuries. They became ceremony, ritual, and expectation. They left scars not only on individuals, but on entire dynasties. The silent suffering of royal women was hidden beneath the golden veils of marriage, and blood on linen became a symbol of legitimacy. But blood was only one form of humiliation. In some courts, the test went even further. There were places where witnesses stood at the very edge of the bed, watching, listening, and judging. And it is to these intrusive rituals that we now turn. Imagine your wedding night, not in privacy, but with strangers at the foot of your bed. In certain medieval courts, this was not fantasy, but reality. To guarantee the success of a marriage, noble witnesses were sometimes required to observe the act itself. The idea was simple and horrifying. If the consummation was witnessed, then no one could dispute that the union was valid. This practice was especially common in France, where royal marriages were matters of state. Courtiers would stand silently in the chamber, sometimes pretending to avert their eyes, sometimes making notes, and sometimes, chillingly, waiting to report the details back to priests or kings. We know of one notorious case in 16th century France, where the young princess Margaret of Valois was married to Henry of Navarre. Chroniclers suggest that witnesses waited outside her chamber, demanding proof of consummation before celebrating the union. Margaret herself described the night as one of fear and exhaustion. Her private life laid bare for politics. Elsewhere, in certain German states, witnesses were not only present, but were allowed to inspect the naked bodies of the couple afterward. This was called the droit de marquette in some accounts, though its practice varied widely. The goal was always the same: to ensure no fraud, no hidden scandal, and no risk that a princess might conceal her true state. For the women involved, it was a humiliation beyond words. A princess could be crowned, honored, and adored in public, only to find herself reduced to an object of scrutiny in private. There was no escape. Her virginity was not her own. It was a contract written into her body, one that strangers were entitled to verify. The trauma of these moments is difficult to imagine. Some brides fainted, others wept through the night. A few rebelled, refusing to cooperate, though such defiance could ruin them. For most, there was only endurance. They endured the silence, the eyes, the waiting, the shame. It was not just about sex. It was about power. Kings, priests, and courtiers wanted certainty, and certainty required invasion. A woman's dignity could be sacrificed to secure a treaty, and her suffering dismissed as necessary. These stories rarely appear in chronicles because they were whispered rather than written. But when they do emerge, they reveal a world where privacy was a luxury denied to the most powerful women. The very brides who were married to unite kingdoms found themselves powerless in the one place they should have been safe. Yet even this was not the most humiliating of tests. In some courts, The princess did not even reach her wedding night before being examined. Physicians, matrons, and priests had ways of ensuring her purity in advance, and these examinations could be just as cruel. Long before the wedding night, some princesses were forced to prove their virginity under the eyes and hands of physicians. These were not healers in the modern sense, but men of the court, loyal first to the crown and only distantly to their patient. The method was invasive. Physicians claimed they could determine chastity by inspecting a woman's body, searching for signs of what they called the hymen intactus. They believed purity could be measured, touched, even certified. In some kingdoms, official documents were signed after such inspections, declaring a princess fit for marriage. One case from 15th century Italy describes how a young bride-to-be was examined by two physicians and a midwife before her wedding. She was stripped, inspected, and pronounced pure. The report was sealed and sent to the groom's family as reassurance. For the princess, it was a violation disguised as medicine. Elsewhere, such examinations were even more public. In Byzantine courts, rumors tell of princesses displayed to matrons of the nobility who prodded and questioned them like livestock. If there was any doubt, physicians would declare the girl unsuitable and negotiations would collapse. It was humiliating and often deeply inaccurate. Medical knowledge was primitive, and what they looked for did not always exist. Some women were condemned unjustly. One French chronicle tells of a noblewoman accused of impurity after an examination, only for her family to prove she had never even spoken privately with a man. The shame, however, remained forever attached to her name. These inspections reveal the cruel truth. A princess's body was not her own. It was a contract, a guarantee, a seal of trust between nations. Her most intimate self was handed over to strangers in exchange for political power. And for the women themselves, it was a moment of shattering fear. Imagine being led into a chamber, told to disrobe before men twice your age, and endure their judgment. Imagine knowing that their word could decide your future, your marriage, and your honor. There was no appeal, no escape, only submission. Some princesses endured quietly, others wept, and a few resisted. But resistance rarely ended well. Defiance could mean annulment, rejection, or worse, accusations of scandal. So most endured, bearing humiliation for the sake of their families. It is chilling to realize that these examinations were not rare, not extraordinary, but part of the fabric of royal life. They were seen as normal, even necessary. Yet for the women inside those rooms, they were moments of betrayal. Still, the cruelty of bedchamber tests did not always succeed in silencing the women. Some found ways to turn the system against itself, to use ritual and expectation as weapons of survival. And it is in those stories of resistance that we find a glimmer of strength amid humiliation. Not every princess surrendered to humiliation in silence. Some found ways, subtle, hidden, dangerous, to resist the system that sought to control them. One method was deception. Chronicles from medieval Spain tell of a bride who feared the blood test and prepared in advance. With the help of her ladies-in-waiting, she smeared chicken blood on the sheets before dawn. When the servants inspected them, the proof was accepted without question. Her secret remained hidden for years. Elsewhere, women learned to manipulate expectations. A Byzantine princess once fainted deliberately during her examination, creating such a scene that physicians dared not continue. Her purity was assumed, and the marriage went forward without further intrusion. There were also quiet rebellions of the spirit. Some brides wrote letters describing their humiliation, leaving behind testimony for future generations. Margaret of Valois, for example, recorded the horrors of her wedding night in her memoirs, refusing to let history forget. Her words became a weapon against the silence imposed by courts. Yet resistance was always dangerous. Discovery could mean ruin. A woman who defied the ritual might be branded a liar, a fraud, or a seductress. And in royal courts, such accusations could cost lives. Still, these stories remind us that even in the darkest traditions, women found ways to preserve their dignity. They endured because they had no choice, but endurance itself became a kind of defiance. To survive was to resist. When we look back at the humiliating bedchamber tests of ancient princesses, we see more than cruelty. We see a system that turned women into objects of politics, stripped of privacy, and bound to rituals that cared nothing for truth or justice. But we also glimpse their strength, fragile, hidden, but real. Imagine once more the princess in her chamber. The candles flicker, the sheets wait, the witnesses breathe outside the door. She is afraid, yes. She is humiliated, yes. But she also holds within her the courage to endure, to survive, and to leave behind a story that still speaks to us today. And perhaps that is the final lesson of these tests. They were meant to reduce women to symbols, to strip them of humanity. Yet in surviving, in enduring, these princesses remind us that even in silence, resistance was possible. Their humiliation was real, their fear was real, but so too was their strength, a strength history tried to bury, but which still whispers to us through the pages of time.